This is Paul English. I teach economics and geography here on the Chesapeake campus. It's sort of a joke that I would be giving a Camtasia presentation because I only know 3 buttons and sometimes I have difficulty with one of those. So as you'll see, I think my productions are not the most polished in the world, but they get the job done. I call Camtasia a screen capture program. Other people might call it by different things. What I mean by that is that anything you can get on your computer screen, you can get into Blackboard. And then you can manipulate the file. You can add and edit voice, you can add and edit music, or you could add overlays, that sort of thing. So in terms of the steps that we'll be looking at today, the first thing is to create your video. Then the second step is to render it and upload it into YouTube. And then the next step is to download into Blackboard. My main message is that the PowerPoint is a really big deal. Don't confuse it with PowerPoint. It's the Power 2 point, not PowerPoint. And there are a million uses that I see for this. Suppose you're in an anatomy and physiology class and a student wants to know about the piriformis, and they want to know how it's why it's so hard to get to in physical anatomy, and how might it be related to back pain. Or suppose you're an economics teacher and you want to talk about supply and demand curve moving, and you want to be able to illustrate what's going to happen to the equilibrium price. It's real nice and convenient to be able to talk as you're showing the curves moving and explaining to the student what's going on. Or suppose you're a statistics class, you're a statistics teacher trying to communicate in a spreadsheet, and if you had to talk about go to cell C4 and then compare that to cell W51, you can see how the communications process would be really difficult, and you wouldn't be able to focus on the theory of the statistics. And so being able to move around on a spreadsheet is tremendously helpful in a statistics class. Or suppose you're an art history teacher and you want to go to one of the major museums in Florence and you want to point something out on a painting or a sculpture. Think how nice it would be to be able to show the student exactly what you were talking about, because you could move the cursor to the place that you were talking. Or suppose you're a geography teacher and you want to be able to point to some place on a map. Again, it makes the communication process much more valuable. There's a multitude of applications for this. You know, a sociology class could go over to MacArthur Mall and be taking pictures, and the next day it could be posted in your Blackboard class. So let me demonstrate. This first one deals with Turkey, and in geography, one of the things we're talking about is a good relative location. So see if being able to point to the map doesn't help you understand the principle a little bit better. So Camtasia, the big thing for me is that Camtasia allows you to point, and being able to point is a strong tool. It took me a little while to catch on to that fact, but I think if you become aware and focus on it, you'll agree with me. So the power to point is a big deal. So when we open the Camtasia program, here's what it looks like. So there's a white square on the left-hand side, and then the Camtasia Studio on the right-hand side. So the 3 buttons that I say I know, one is the record the screen button, one is the import the media, and one is produce and share. So if I pressed on the import the media, here's what it looks like. I bring in this photo of the cat, and then when we hit the record the screen, we're going to move the cat's going to go from the left-hand side of the screen over to the right-hand side of the screen. So let's see what that looks like. So now we have the cat there, and we're ready to begin our recording process. Every time I see this photo, I want to tickle that cat's stomach. It's such a cute photo. The next thing we do is we render. After you've finished your video, then it needs to be rendered, and what that means is that it converts the Camtasia file into an MP3 file. And evidently it's easier to do that through YouTube than just about anywhere else. And so when you do the rendering process, you can either render it to screencast. They're the people who own Camtasia, and they provide a free storage area for you, or you can render it to YouTube. And that's what I have preferred to do for most of my videos. When you do that, then you go into Blackboard, and in this case I've gone into the announcements, but you could also go into course content. Either way is fine. And in the announcements, then you would go to item, and it's just like any other screen that you've seen, and then you go over here to the HTML button right here. Once you click on that, this is the screen that appears, and once you have that, the next step is to go into Blackboard, and here are the steps to do the rendering. You hit play, then you hit pause, then you come over and hit share, then you hit embed. When you do that, you get this HTML code right here. All you do is copy and paste that boy back over into this window that you'd already opened, and then when you hit submit, boom, it's going to come into Blackboard like this. And you can add text material here if you want. It's no problem. And then we can go to the screencast. This is the place, the free storage area. And earlier we saw this demonstration. This was about supply and demand curves. And even though it's boring to me, you see how slow and deliberate I was talking. So I think for students trying to learn the material, it makes sense to slow down. I did not show this scene. This is economic development. This comes off of my website. If we'd come in here to Rice to Riches, that's where the economic development came from, and it's an hour long. So for my students, they can either go to the slideshow without voice and do it in about 10 or 15 minutes, or they can go to screencast and listen to my overlay, my voice overlay, and it's about an hour long. And here is the screenshot of YouTube. This is where you will post your videos. And then in terms of some principles, I think 5 minutes is probably the optimum amount of time. Students don't like to spend too much time. You know, YouTube has a 15-minute time limit. I think 10 minutes is probably close to a maximum. And of course there's exceptions to the rule. The supply and demand presentation is 22 minutes, so that's why I put it on screencast. The Rice to Riches, as I just said, that's about an hour long. And for me, it's okay if you make a mistake. If it's not a major mistake, I just kind of press on. Once you get sophisticated with Camtasia, you would be able to edit out any mistake that you made. I'm not quite there yet. In terms of another principle, you always need to make a script when you're doing this. You want to be economical with the listener's time. I'm using a script for this presentation. So it's just the best way to fly. To leave you with the main message of the presentation, the power to point really is a big deal. If you become aware of it and sensitive to it and think about it, I think you'll end up agreeing with me. And one final comment. When I hear somebody's voice, I feel like I know them better, and I think our students feel the same way. So that's another reason I like to use these Camtasia presentations, because the student gets to sense your personality based on your voice. Thank you for your time.